let's go. Is that the deal?
It's not good for my stomach. It's not good
Yeah.
for my brain. Only good for the journalism.
Yeah, well, I
Uh,
guess you haven't learned this idea that you should eat a good breakfast to get your day started in the right way, and that, I've been told that includes having kind of a high protein breakfast, which is, something I gotta
I
work my way toward.
This might be controversial either with you or with the people who are watching, but I'm not a breakfast guy. I actually find breakfast to be the least enjoyable meal out of all the meals. And I frequently find myself looking for lunchtime foods to eat first thing in the morning. Um, I'm a big believer in like cold spaghetti from the night before as a you know your
Yeah.
protein. You can make sure it's a bolognese, but
Look,
for me,
here I thought we were gonna talk about Ukraine, but the truth is, I think we better sort out some of our nutritional, challenges here, just to make sure, we need you built for the long haul, I'm not sure you're setting yourself up for success in that way with,
well,
bolognese at first thing in the morning.
there's a famous Ukrainian sort of cafeteria style restaurant, and it's called Puzata Hata, and they serve their traditional breakfast foods, pancakes and eggs, but they also serve borscht and rice and chicken and things like simple things early in the morning too. So I gravitate to that because when I'm eating breakfast, I don't want to know that I'm eating breakfast. Um,
I'm trying to turn my world around from cereal and the usual things and just do more high protein in the morning, and I think it does set you up for the day in a way that's useful. But okay, let's jump in. I'm really grateful to be joined by Tim Mak, joining us from Kyiv. We don't usually do it quite so early in the morning, but I want to be mindful of Tim's schedule. It's a little bit later there than it is in East Coast America. If you don't know Tim and the counteroffensive, you should. If you don't know Tim, I mean, just a couple of things besides him publishing this important newsletter. He used to be at NPR, was an investigative correspondent there. He was also at the Daily Beast and Politico, among other places. But it's the work that he's doing now that brings us together, a lot has been happening. We talked for a minute beforehand in our world in the last weeks, in the last year. So I'm particularly just wanting to start by asking, how are you, and are you in a safe place?
the last few weeks have been a little bit quieter, but June and July saw incredible amounts of attacks, both missile attacks and drone attacks on civilian urban areas in Ukraine. Um, I'm doing okay. I mean, you kind of just start to factor in the terror. To be honest with you, we have a
Yeah.
story today on the counteroffensive is about the sounds you'll hear when you're lying in bed at night.
Yes.
Um, what we did is we recorded or took from video the sounds of all the different wartime sounds that you'll hear as you wait in the dark during an air raid. And what you can do very quickly, and what I did, even years ago, is you can quickly differentiate just by sound alone, whether there are drone attacks that's happening, whether there are missile attacks happening, whether it's outgoing air defense, whether it's incoming attacks, whether it's anti-aircraft fire. But then what happens as you absorb that at night is that you enter a state of hypervigilance, not only at night, not only during the air raids. And so sounds that are similar to drones, like revving motorcycles,
Yeah.
and the entire city of Kyiv is being terrorized by their trash collection trucks because they sound like, incoming missiles. So there is this sort of, and this is the kind of journalism that we're trying to do, which is very much at the ground truth, human interest level. But what is it like to experience the war? Um, and what we've done in our most recent story is we've posted all these clips of the audio, so you can kind of hear what it is that we hear when we're just waiting and listening, and or woken up in the middle of the night by one sound or the other. And I mean, it is part of what you've got to get used to if you're living in a war zone.
Yeah,
I don't want anything to do with fireworks. I don't want anything to do with souped up cars. Uh, and it's not a conscious thing. It's this knot of tension that just expands very suddenly when you hear a sound that you think might be danger, and that's something I think that's going to stay with me and everyone who's living here for a very long time.
yeah. So, it's so important that you're doing this work, and that you're sharing this. I think one of the challenges, 3 years on, of the war is that people become disconnected. I'm talking about people who are obviously not there, and they start losing a sense of what the day-to-day reality is and the danger and the deadliness, all of that. And so, for me, it seems part of the challenge, which I think you've taken up, is to be able to give people the capacity for compassion, which means that you have a genuine feeling of what's going on the ground. So, look, I'm curious: are people? I mean, it feels like given the increase in drone strikes, bombings, and so forth on civilian targets, people are feeling less safe.
They're feeling I mean, it comes and goes, right? We have these weeks. Um, you'll know that the Trump administration has a special envoy to Ukraine, General Kellogg, and people put two and two together. And what happens typically is when Kellogg is in Kyiv, there are no attacks in Kyiv, and so people have been joking that he's a good luck charm. And
Yeah,
you know, like, you just kind of like the human brain prefers a bad explanation to no explanation, and so
yeah.
we create patterns in our heads, and so think, "Oh, Kellogg's our good luck charm," and we can
Are are
imagine that
are they
attacks them.
are they predictable in any way, or is that part of the problem? You have no idea when they're coming.
They're predictable in the sense that they almost always happen at night. That's
Yeah,
one way to predict it. So during the day, the Kyiv is usually during the day a pretty normally functioning city, and then the sun sets, and you kind of think, well, when will the attacks begin? When will the air raid sirens start?
yeah,
It's also less common for these attacks to occur when it's very foggy and very rainy because it's not ideal conditions for the drones to fly. And so, and the real irony is that when it's a thunderstorm, that it isn't that there are unlikely to be attacks, but then the thunder itself
right.
sounds like explosions outside, so you're on edge anyways.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Has it
that's
changed where you're actually physically, placing your body every night, and are you hearing that, either from, just people or part of your team, changes in behavior to be able to sort of manage this escalation of, bombing civilian targets?
so I have a hallway I retreat to when I think it's really getting spicy. One thing we did as the escalating attacks were uh, were really starting to bite, is well, we one of our missions is to train our team of Ukrainian reporters here to do
Yeah,
feature writing,
yeah,
and no higher mission for me than to make sure that they're safe. And so what we did last month is we made sure that each of them had cots and batteries and first aid kits, so that when they move to the subway, which is where you can go in order to spend the night if you want to get a decent night's rest, that they had, like, they weren't sleeping on a concrete floor or something like that. And
yeah,
so we made sure our team had that, had medical equipment, had even an eye sleep mask.
mm,
It's always bright down there, and earplugs. But it's a testament to how adaptable people can be. You
yeah,
wonder, like, this happened in New York City. I think New York would respond very similarly.
mm,
Uh,
mm,
it's hard to imagine. Imagine you live in New York City and every night there are 500 drones flying around and explosions all night. And how an American city might react to some of this. I think New York has the grit to deal with it.
yeah, yeah. Well,
LA, I don't know
the
about LA. sort of
there's grit, there's
there.
adaptability, there's resilience, and there's also, a lot of underground places that you can go. I was just in Finland, and one of the things I was sort of doing a little bit of research on was sort of the underground bunkers there, and it's 5.5 million population. About 3 million in Helsinki. There's more underground spaces for people to go than the entire population. And that's something that they've built over, surely since 1917 when they became an independent country from the Soviet Union and from Russia, and understanding the danger of having a 830-mile border with Russia, and two wars in particularly in 41 and 43, that were profound in terms of the psyche and the life of the country. And so, they have been, I think, almost at a kind of continual war preparation ever since. So I'm curious, are there, I mean, talked about the subway, are there a lot of underground places for people to go if they need to?
There are. I mean, the subway system was also designed dually as a bomb shelter system,
Yeah,
much like the Helsinki
yeah,
experience you observed. And so these subway stations are deep, deep underground. But there's terrifying video that comes out from these subway stations. Once there was a fire nearby, and smoke got in, and created a panic. And I mean, this is not a pleasant way to spend your night.
yeah,
Uh, but, people are pretty adaptable. I think
yeah.
Ukrainians especially so.
So let's sort of jump into a little bit of the larger dynamic for a minute. I mean, it's less than 2 weeks since Trump met Putin in Alaska, and the whole world saw his kowtowing to the Kremlin's murderous boss, followed by a genuinely supportive gathering of European leaders with President Zelensky at the White House. But there again, Trump seemed uh, mostly indifferent, to put it blandly. How are people feeling in the wake of these meetings? Has it demoralized you? Has it demoralized your team? Has it demoralized, people that you're in touch with?
Well, I think to be disappointed, you have to have expectations to begin with, and expectations were so low
Well,
for come to some sort of agreement with Putin, that really the only thing that was good that came out of it was that it wasn't much worse. Um, but if you look at what Trump has publicly stated as to his intentions going into the Putin summit, and what we have now, we don't have a ceasefire,
yeah,
we don't have a deadline, we don't have any sort of deal towards peace negotiations, and we have no sanctions or even threatened sanctions other than the very abstract.
yeah,
If anything, we're further away from peace 2 weeks after the summit than we were, right in the preceding moments before the summit. There's been less than no progress,
yeah.
and at the time people are dying here.
Yeah, I mean, look, the fact is that Trump claimed, falsely, emptily, that there'd be quote unquote very serious consequences if Putin doesn't agree to a peace deal. Well, we know how reliable his threats are. Particularly when it comes to Putin, who he's flattered by and who he wants to gain his support in whatever way he can. So, I mean, is it understood at this point, unfortunately, that Trump and more broadly that the U.S. can't be trusted?
I mean, I think one of the things we're trying to do at the counteroffensive is to play a small role um, in plugging up the gap that has resulted from decades of foreign bureaus across the world closing in the English language for English language news publications.
Mhm.
And I don't say that just to boost what we're doing. I say that to point out a serious problem in the way that foreign opinions and information aren't properly being transmitted to the United States. That I think um, the level of alienation and betrayal among European capitals and the European populations in general of the Trump administration, and I think a deep skepticism is not even strong enough. A disgust with the current government in the United States is something that is going to take a generation or more to fix. And I think that's been poorly portrayed because so many of the writers for American press are based out of the United States and only get glimpses into foreign opinion. It's been I don't want to disparage everyone, but
Yeah,
I think uh, I think that the decline in the number of foreign bureaus around the world has really been a detriment of American understanding of how things are going. And in the United States, it's often covered. This summit at the White House. It was covered as kind of an ordeal, a spectacle.
mm,
Um, but we at the counteroffensive, we watched it. We were waiting for a moment to write something about it, and then we were up until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning here in Ukraine, um, and we just decided not to write anything about it. That we would be writing a story about this meeting just to write a story about this meeting when nothing substantial came from it.
right,
Uh,
right, right, right.
uh,
I mean, nothing substantial except to underscore the lack of commitment from Trump, to be sure. And look, actually, one of my subscribers had asked sort of beforehand for me to ask this question, which I think is sort of on point right now. Do Ukrainians recognize the distinction between Trump and his pro Putin regime and the will of the American people, that the Americans are not are not simply this government, and is there, with the disgust that people may have toward the government, I mean, is there an understanding that that ain't all of us?
I think there is, and I think the louder we Americans who are supportive of Ukraine speak out, the more obvious that distinction will be. I haven't been, pied in the face walking down the street yet. Um,
Not yet.
I think I think the Ukrainians also understand that the United States have provided a lot of help, and
Right.
up until the moment, and I don't think that, and that would have been impossible without the support of the many Americans who are supportive of Ukraine, and so I think there is that distinction, but I do get a lot of sort of disapproving looks and demands for explanation on how the United States could possibly
Yeah.
a man like this, because to the rest of the world, it's madness. Just does not make any sense.
Yeah, look, I lived in London in the 1980s. That's a long time ago, but at the time when Ronald Reagan was president, and I remembered then how often I had to have a conversation that was, pointing fingers at me because of the American president, and I tried to say I am not him. On the other hand, at a certain point, we all carry the sins of the leadership, I'm glad that you're sort of doing the good work there to remind people that there are important Americans who care about the fate of Ukraine.
Well, Stephen, I'm trying to understand what's happening over there in my America as well, right? Like I'm trying to understand. We launched the counteroffensive to write stories about people in democracies resisting authoritarianism. We launched it in 2023. I did not think by this point we would be talking about the United States as a country where we could it would fit the mission statement, right?
Yeah,
We thought of it as Ukraine, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not quite understanding what's happening to DC, which is the city I
right.
spent 15 living in. Um, and just the rat-a-tat of constant news. I'm seeing just now that the sandwich thrower,
Yeah, he was
who
not in.
he was a grand jury refused to indict him,
Right.
uh, which is it at least brings a smile to my face.
Yeah.
But
Maybe it's slightly less dangerous that somebody throws a Subway sandwich than you have, National Guards armed with M4 rifles.
well, here's the problem. You may know that my background includes 5 years in the U.S. Army as a National Guardsman. In the West Virginia National Guard, which, as you know, the West Virginia is one of the states that is sending.
Yeah.
se-
To the military occupation in DC. Yeah.
and I was in a military police unit for 3 years
Mm.
of my time in the guard, and so I suspect that some of the people that I know have been called up for this action. Um, the Guard used to be this group of people who are the most civic minded in their communities. In order to join the U.S. Military, you have to have a high school degree or equivalent. You have to have no criminal record. You have to pass a physical test. You have to get through basic training. You have to be knowledgeable enough to learn a skill and then bring that home. Um, and it really, really it bugs me. It bothers me
Yeah,
that these troops are being used in this way. These people all have their own lives they've been torn from
yeah,
because of foolish political decisions. And I'm reading today that guardsmen are picking up trash in Washington D.C. They've been
yeah.
torn from their communities, brought to Washington D.C. to pick up trash. I mean, it's a huge shame, and it's an outrage.
Yeah, it's a danger, escalating police state, driven now with the spectacle of this military deployment, and it's an abuse and it's a misuse of the National Guard, as you suggest. I'm a civilian. I've always been a civilian, but I can tell you that I have a great fondness and admiration for the National Guard, including for the reason that the first time that I got a COVID shot, which was, I was in Arizona and I was sent to sort of State Farm Stadium, which is the Arizona Cardinals football stadium. At 1:45 a.m. was my appointment, and I drove up to a National Guardsman who actually was the one who vaccinated me.
You would
Um,
have been a medic. Would have been a
yeah,
medic just like.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
just my own very personal kind of reason to respect them. And look, I mean, I think we are going to see an escalation from this guy who obviously is making a commitment to be a dictator. He said it yesterday. People are saying that they want me to be a dictator. Well, the fact of the matter is that the escalation, I'm hopeful, because the escalation is going to mean, as it moves into other democratic states and democratic cities, you're going to start seeing more defiance at a state level that's going to be meaningful. And I think the solutions for America may be the defiance that happens at the state level within our federal system when states have sort of independent power to make their own decisions. So I think this is, the escalation may be part of the path forward in a positive sense of opposing this, hostile regime. Hey, so I want to, I still got you. It was just, I think we might have frozen for just a second. You're still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, okay, good, good. So I want to take our last minutes. I know our time is tight. I want to take our last minute still to sort of stick with Ukraine, and I want to one sort of share a quote that came from Zelensky after this whole kind of so-called peace conversations that have been happening. Zelensky said, "We need a just peace, a peace where our future will be decided only by us." Ukraine is not a victim, it's a fighter. And I'm wondering whether that mindset sort of remains sort of fundamental when surely people are tiring of the war, and A, and B, is the commitment to the support of Zelensky holding, or is that waning also as the war continues?
Well, Zelensky, the last time I checked, his approval rating was in the 60s, which not great, but better than any American president of that I can remember in the last few years. Um, and when you talk to Ukrainians, surveys will show you that an increasing percentage are willing to end the war without the restoration of all their territories.
Mm,
But they're not willing to do is give up more territory
yeah,
or come to some agreement where we'll simply have a war again in another 12 or 36 months. That's what they're not willing to do.
yeah.
And I don't think any reasonable person could demand that of them. That if they don't get a diplomatic solution that ensures that they're not going to get attacked again with real rock solid guarantees, they're not going to agree to this peace.
Does that
Uh,
Include giving up the Donbass?
I think that includes many people when they talk about this, they look at a map and they say, okay, there's a sliver of land here, and you'd have to hand it over in sort of any sort of negotiation. But what's omitted from the map is the strategic defensive lines and entrenchments that have been built there, right? Um, so right now, the Ukrainians are holding the Russians at what they call their fortress line. This fortress line is a series of entrenchments and defensive positions and um, and underground fortifications that have held the line against Russian attack for now 11 years.
Mm,
So when Putin said he wants all of the Donbass, very sneakily, what that does is it annexes or would take territory on the other side of the entrenchment line, such that should he want to attack again, and there's no
yeah,
reason to wouldn't, he would be able to do so without having to face this long established and relatively easily defended line. And it's all flat plain out
yeah,
between that area and major Ukrainian cities. So it's not just when people talk about it in an abstraction, sometimes it misses the
yeah,
strategic picture that's on the ground here. It would be very unwise from a military perspective for the Ukrainians to voluntarily give up and walk away from those positions.
yeah. I mean, look, I think you add to that. I think one of the underline or the point that you made that's so fundamental is the expectation that if you can make a deal, but how do you know that it's going to hold? How do you know that the words that have been spoken or the signatures that have been signed can be trusted? And look, that goes back to the 90s and Ukraine making the decision to give up its nuclear weapons, sort of based on promises. From the Americans and from the Russians, so here we are, and so I respect that the Ukrainians are skeptical in this moment. So let me just ask, with a minute or so we have left, how does the conflict end?
I wish I knew. And if I gave you an answer to that question, you wouldn't be well suited to believe me.
Mm,
I don't know.
yeah,
But what's clear is that Vladimir Putin can't win on the battlefield. So he's trying to win in the diplomatic route. He's trying to leverage Trump to either prolong the war and create additional economic costs to Ukraine, um, or he's going to continue to try to grind down the Ukrainians.
yeah,
Now, this will go on forever, but the war is being fought on Ukrainian soil, and so the
right,
Ukrainians are going to have a greater cost the longer this happens than the Russians are, at least from where I'm sitting. Um, that said, Russia is suffering in some serious ways. I mean, their interest rates are around 20%. Inflation is through the roof in double digits. They've lost more people in 3.5 years of warfare than than the Soviet Union lost in a decade of war in the invasion of Afghanistan,
yeah,
which
but they
was
stuck
one of
with
the
it.
collapse of the Soviet Union.
They stuck with it for a decade. I mean, I agree with you. It's one of the reasons that led to the collapse, but they stuck with it that long. And I mean, let's surely hope that we're not looking at the same situation where they're just going to grind on and on and
Well,
on.
they've had such a catastrophic loss of people that the invasion of Afghanistan, which was a very bloody conflict, in over the course of 10 years, we've had the same number of casualties in 3.5 here in Ukraine. I just want to give you a sense of the scale of the
Yeah,
magnitude disaster this has been for Russian society and the Russian military.
yeah, yeah. So, what about you? I mean, let's talk about that beautiful moment when the war ends. Do you stick, or do you make plans to make a move yourself?
I'm sticking with Ukraine for the foreseeable future. I've got a team here. We're running the counteroffensive. Even if the war ends, we're going to be writing human interest stories, deeply reported, uh, human narrative stories about people in the world, particularly in democracies that are resisting authoritarianism. And so
Yeah,
we'll do that, Eve, and in times of peace and in times of war. Um, we'll continue to do that.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that I'm sitting in America, and I think I'm writing about, how people are trying to resist authoritarianism, from these shores, and, sad to say, I think the work you're doing is really important. Again, I'm really appreciative to be able to talk with you, Tim, especially because it's so important for people not to, lose their, capacity to understand what people are facing, because then when the indifference comes, when the compassion evaporates, that's when the worst things can happen. So appreciate you informing people. For my subscribers, if you don't know Tim Mak and the Counteroffensive, do check it out. Do subscribe. If you don't know me, I'm Steven Beschloss with America America, and I hope you'll check it out and subscribe as well.
Yes, and for anyone who's a reader of the Counteroffensive, I really do encourage you to check out America America. The best way to subscribe very easily from the screen, if you're watching on your phone, is just go to the upper left-hand corner and click on where it says Steven Beschloss and or Tim Mak, and you can very easily hit subscribe as a result. So please do, if you're watching, whether from my audience or from Steven's audience, we'd love to have you with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tim, let's do this again, okay?
Love
Stay
that.
safe. Yeah.
You too. Take care.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.